A man once feared by every noble in England, a commoner who ruled a king, is dragged through London in chains. His name is Thomas Cromwell. He built the machine that crushed his enemies. And now, that same machine is about to crush him. In a single morning, the blacksmith's son who remade England will learn the final truth of power, that in Henry VIII's world, loyalty is never protection. Chapter 1. A Commoner in a Kingdom of Lords. England, summer of 1540. Fog curls over the Thames as a man in chains is dragged through the streets of London. He is not a thief nor a rebel, but the second most powerful figure in England, Thomas Cromwell, once the king's most trusted minister, now condemned as a traitor. Within hours, the blacksmith's son who remade England will lose his head. But to understand his fall, you must first see the climb that made it possible. Thomas Cromwell was born around 1485 in the small riverside village of Putney. His father was a rough tavern keeper and blacksmith, known more for fists than fortune. Thomas grew up amid noise, iron, and drunken arguments. One day, after a brutal beating, he ran, leaving England behind forever. Across Europe, the runaway forged himself into something new. He fought as a mercenary in Italy, worked in the counting houses of Venice, and studied the methods of bankers and politicians who ruled not by birth, but by cunning. He learned law, finance, and the darker arts of diplomacy. He read The Prince before it was fashionable, and he understood it. By the time Cromwell returned to London, he was no longer the blacksmith's son. He was a worldly man with knowledge rare among Englishmen. While nobles clung to old codes of honor, Cromwell knew the power of information and money. That knowledge would make him indispensable, and later, destroy him. Chapter 2. Entering the Corridors of Power. In the 1520s, Cromwell entered the household of Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, the king's chief minister and the true ruler of England. Wolsey, brilliant yet arrogant, ran the realm for Henry VIII, until he failed to deliver what Henry desired most, a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. The Pope refused. Henry's patience snapped. Wolsey fell, stripped of titles, and died in disgrace before facing execution. Most of his followers abandoned him, but not Cromwell. He stayed, defending his master before Parliament and earning a reputation for loyalty under fire. That act caught Henry's eye. Here was a man who could serve without flattery and survive when others perished. By 1532, Cromwell was made the king's principal secretary. From there, he began building something England had never seen before, a state ruled not by nobles, but by bureaucracy, by law, by paper. Chapter 3. The Architect of the English Reformation. Cromwell understood Henry's true hunger, not just for a new wife, but for absolute control. The Church of Rome stood between the king and his desires. Cromwell found a way to tear it down. With precision and ruthlessness, he pushed through laws declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. Centuries of papal authority were replaced by royal command. The monasteries, some older than the nation itself, were closed, looted, and sold. Gold flooded the treasury. Cromwell's agents moved like accountants of destruction, recording, confiscating, demolishing. Thousands of monks and nuns were expelled. The bells that once called England to prayer now rang no more. To Cromwell, this was efficiency. To the old order, it was desecration. But Henry was delighted. And for a time, Cromwell's star blazed higher than ever. He built the first modern intelligence network in English history. Spies reported every whisper of dissent. Letters crossed borders under ciphered seals. He knew before anyone else who plotted, who prayed, and who would hang. Opponents vanished into the Tower, condemned with legal documents written by Cromwell's own hand. He was the king's hammer, precise, relentless, feared. But the higher he climbed, the thinner the air became. Chapter 4. The Summit of Power. By the late 1530s, Thomas Cromwell was at the very peak of English politics. He had titles, wealth, and an army of bureaucrats at his command. Henry's nobles, descended from knights and crusaders, bowed to the son of a blacksmith. They obeyed him, but they hated him. Cromwell knew it. He once told a friend, "If the lion knew his strength, no man could rule him." He was that lion's keeper, but he could never forget that Henry VIII was the lion himself. Still, he pressed on. In 1540, the king made him Earl of Essex, one of the highest honors in the realm. His enemies gnashed their teeth as the crown placed a title of nobility on a man of no lineage. But that very act of triumph sealed his doom. For in Tudor England, nothing angered the old order more than seeing one of their own replaced by a commoner. And then Cromwell made the one mistake no minister should ever make. He gave Henry a marriage the king did not want. Chapter 5. The Cleves Catastrophe. Europe in 1539 stood on edge, Catholic empires on one side, Protestant princes on the other. Cromwell wanted England tied to the Protestant cause. His plan, a diplomatic marriage between Henry and Anne of Cleves, sister of a German duke. Portraits were painted, treaties signed, and Henry was pleased until he met her. In January 1540, the king entered her chambers in disguise, expecting a romantic surprise. What he found was a woman he found plain, shy, and foreign. "Call me not your majesty," he whispered later, "for I am not well pleased." He compared her to a Flanders mare, mocked the smell of her breath, and raged that Cromwell had tricked him. The political brilliance of the match no longer mattered. To Henry, this was betrayal made flesh. The Catholic nobles pounced. The Duke of Norfolk, Cromwell's oldest rival, saw an opening. His young niece, Catherine Howard, had already caught the king's wandering eye. If she became queen, Norfolk's family would rule the court, and Cromwell would be finished. If you're drawn to stories like this, of power, betrayal, and the dark machinery behind history, pause for a second and subscribe. Each week we uncover another empire that built its own destruction, one decision at a time. Chapter 6. The Web Tightens. Early 1540. Rumors swirl through the royal palace like smoke. Cromwell's once loyal allies now avoid his gaze. Meetings grow tense. Every whisper seems to carry a name: heretic, traitor, deceiver. The Duke of Norfolk and Bishop Gardiner construct the perfect trap. They portray Cromwell as a secret Protestant extremist, a man who had corrupted Henry's church, misled his king, and plotted with foreign reformers. Letters once used for diplomacy are twisted into proof of treason. His network of spies and ambassadors becomes a web of supposed heretics. Each line of his work, once evidence of loyalty, now reads like guilt. Henry's temper turns. The king who once called Cromwell our most faithful servant begins to see him as an enemy. And so, the destroyer of men becomes his own next victim. Chapter 7. The Arrest, June 10, 1540. The council chamber at Westminster buzzes with the business of the realm. Cromwell sits at the head of the table, calm, efficient, unaware that this meeting will end his life. Without warning, the Duke of Norfolk rises. He reads aloud a document, formal charges of treason and heresy. The room freezes. Cromwell blinks, speechless. When he protests, Norfolk silences him with a shout. Traitors have no right to speak. Guards move in. They seize him, strip away his insignia, and tear from his chest the blue ribbon of the Order of the Garter, a mark of honor granted only weeks earlier. His staff of office is snapped in two. The hammer of England has fallen silent. Outside, word spreads like fire. London erupts in gossip and disbelief. A crowd gathers to see the once mighty minister dragged toward the Tower of London in irons. Some cheer. Others whisper prayers. For if Cromwell can fall, anyone can. Chapter 8. The Tower. The Tower of London. Stone fortress, prison, and tomb of England's great and damned. Now, it becomes Cromwell's final address. He is placed in a cold, bare cell. The silk robes and golden chains are gone. His meals are coarse bread and thin ale. The man who once commanded nobles now waits for their judgment. Interrogations begin at once. His captors use his own tactics: isolation, pressure, relentless questioning. They confront him with letters, twist words into treason, demand confessions. Old allies are sent to visit, not to console, but to measure his fear. Each silence is taken as proof of guilt, each word as self-condemnation. No physical torture is needed. Cromwell's own methods, psychological, subtle, efficient, now dismantle him piece by piece. He begins to fade, hair whitening, eyes hollow, health failing, yet still he clings to hope. Henry has spared favorites before. If he can annul the Cleves marriage, perhaps mercy will follow. He works from his cell, drafting documents to free the king from Anne of Cleves, the same marriage that destroyed him. He writes to his son, Gregory, urging him to keep faith and honor. It is the last act of a father and statesman combined. Chapter 9. The Bill of Attainder Parliament convenes to finish the job. There is no trial, no defense. Instead, Cromwell is condemned through a single document, a Bill of Attainder, a legal instrument he himself perfected. It declares him guilty of treason and heresy without evidence or hearing. His property is seized, his family disgraced, his name to be erased from memory. Every system he built, the courts, the councils, the propaganda, now turns against him. He has constructed a machine of power so efficient it no longer needs him. And the machine devours its maker. Still, whispers reach his cell. Perhaps the king will show mercy. Perhaps death will be delayed. Each day he waits in torment, balanced between hope and despair. Chapter 10. The Final Morning Dawn, July 28, 1540. The sky over London is grey. Church bells toll, but not for Cromwell. They toll for celebration. At Whitehall Palace, Henry VIII prepares to marry Catherine Howard. While he begins his fifth marriage, his former minister is led to die. Cromwell is marched from the Tower through jeering crowds. Iron manacles bite his wrists. He looks out at faces once eager for his favor, now hungry for spectacle. The scaffold on Tower Hill waits, a platform built for traitors. He ascends calmly, though pale. Observers say he speaks quietly, like a man exhausted by fear. He asks the crowd to pray for him, confesses himself a sinner, and begs God's mercy on the king. He does not plead innocence. To do so would mean defying royal justice. And defiance is death beyond death. The executioner raises his axe. With one heavy blow, it ends. The crowd gasps. The blacksmith's son, who ruled England, dies by the same steel he once wielded in words and law. His head is lifted high, then carried to London Bridge and mounted on a spike beside other traitors. His body is buried in an unmarked grave. The king's new wedding feast begins before the blood has dried. Chapter 11. The consequences. Cromwell's death sends tremors through Europe. Abroad, ambassadors report disbelief that the architect of England's Reformation has been destroyed overnight. Catholic rulers rejoice, calling it divine justice. Protestant princes recoil, realizing Henry's friendship is worth nothing. England stands isolated once again. At home, the reaction is divided. Commoners who resented Cromwell's taxes cheer. Scholars and reformers mourn quietly. And within months, Henry himself begins to regret. He confides to his council, "He was a faithful servant. I have been misled." But remorse cannot resurrect a man. Without Cromwell, government falters. Finances crumble. Religious policy whipsaws between Catholicism and reform. The nobles who plotted his downfall prove incapable of ruling what he once controlled with ease. The king has destroyed his own foundation. Chapter 12. The Legacy of the King's Hammer. Centuries later, historians still argue over Cromwell's nature. Was he a monster or a modernizer? A tyrant or a visionary? To his enemies, he was arrogance made flesh. A commoner who reached too high, tearing down sacred monasteries and spilling blood in the name of efficiency. To others, he was the father of modern government, the man who replaced medieval chaos with centralized order. He gave England a bureaucracy, a surveillance system, a parliament that could be shaped by power rather than defy it. He understood that the pen could do what armies could not, but his greatest creation was also his destruction. He built a machine that needed no morality, no mercy, and no conscience, only obedience. And when the wheel turned, it crushed him with perfect precision. Chapter 13. The Final Lesson. Thomas Cromwell's story is not merely about Tudor politics. It is about power itself, how it consumes those who believe they control it. He rose higher than any man of his birth had ever dared. He ruled through intellect and paperwork, not armies or bloodlines. Yet his brilliance blinded him. He forgot the oldest rule of monarchy: the closer you stand to the throne, the nearer you are to the axe. In the end, Cromwell's fall was not just punishment. It was prophecy. He had shown England how to govern through law, and in doing so, proved that law can be weaponized as easily as a sword. Tower Hill still stands. The wind that sweeps across its stones once carried the echo of the crowd that watched him die. It whispers the same truth to every age. Power is never loyal. It serves only itself. And those who master it for too long will one day be mastered by it. If this story of Thomas Cromwell made you rethink what power really costs, share it. Let others see how history repeats itself. Ambition rising, loyalty breaking, and the axe always waiting. Then stay with us for the next descent into another forgotten age of ruin.